from what you were saying, Eric, that does put it pre-Earls by quite a bit. But it puts it within those first couple of generations of Scandinavians moving into the area. Now, if I was mathematically inclined, which I am not, I'm still scarred by crying over my maths homework at the age of 12. But there are people who can reconstruct the likely dimensions of these monuments from something like that sort of a fragment, because that preserves enough of the curve of the armpits to tell you roughly how big one cross arm was, which is going to tell you roughly how big the other cross arm is, which allows you to hypothesize the centre between the two of them. And you're not going to put something, okay, let's say that cross arm was originally as big a cross near as this red box. You've then got a centre, and then you've got another cross arm. So you've got quite a big crosshead, a generous crosshead. You're not going to put that on your monument like this big, like the Middleton crosses. It's going to be a big fella. And I'm even more convinced now, having seen this and having thought more and talked with people over lunch about where this church is in relation to the river much, much earlier. I think you're absolutely right. The river would have been a lot closer. I think there was quite an incline down to it. And it makes absolute sense when you look at where these crosses are put up in the landscape in the early medieval period. They put them on promontories. Everybody's going to see them. They tend not to put them down, you know, where you're not going to see them unless there's a really good access road that's going to make it stand up in front of them. And I think if you're coming around the bend or around the bend, this promontory is going to stand up with a cross on it. It's going to make it really visible in the landscape. Now, whether that's, and I don't think it's an either or, I think it's both and. River crossing, possible baptismal site, land owned by somebody with ecclesiastical associations. I don't think this comes from a funerary cross. I think it would have been more, I'm not going to say elaborate, but I think it had more ambition than to mark the grave of somebody, which doesn't mean that doesn't have an ambition, just a different ambition. Personally, I love to think of it as painted, because that's going to make that decoration much clearer. You've got that lovely central boss in the centre, which is one of the clear demarcators of reference to the jewelled cross. This is something that goes on and on and on. I'm drinking myself a hernia. I think that's safer, yeah. So you've got this boss here. I suspect it was not carved in deep relief, but there's certainly quite a bit of modelling going on in that. So, and yes, you can see the chip marks and the chisel. It's brilliant, isn't it? So the work I've seen where people have made these reproductions is they do mark it out with chisel, and you've got those chisel marks running along that line there. And then they do the finishing off. But a lot of times you get those chisel marks left, not because they were incompetent, but because they knew that was going to be covered up. So what we're seeing is what we were never meant to see. We're literally seeing it without its clothing on. All a bit embarrassing. And I think it would be interesting to get a conservator in to see what to do to test that and see whether that is mortar, lime mortar, or whether it's something else.
Presumably after all this time you wouldn't be able to find traces of paint on it still. Just be all one way.
Well, this is what the discussion is about what this sort of thing is. Now, whether that's an old lichen that's taken up home, or whether that's leftover mortar,
It's interesting that is more suggestive of mortar, whereas this is like a coating, isn't it?
Yes.
So mortar would tend to break off and give a broken or an irregular
No,
surface.
I think it would
quite
be
smooth.
really interesting to have to find the money to pay somebody to come and have a look at that.
You know what? I could never see the image that was on the other side.
I think this is going to be the Christmas quiz. Answers on a postcard, please. The most imaginative gets a free Christmas cake.
Someone's actually, I've seen a linear drawing around it, but I can't remember what it was. But it definitely is something figurative.
Eric is proposing that there's two strands of interlace coming up there, and presumably going round and back down. Now, to my mind, you might be having one of those creatures in Scandinavian art which has the lappets and interlace extensions coming out of the body. So in my mind, the jury is out on that one. But I don't think it's a human form.
No, I think we both think it's not figure, which is what the standard work says it is, unfortunately.
Yes, that's the one I think I was thinking, yeah.
It was one of those gins that was being passed out.
I think that's very likely.
Amazing what gin can induce. Mother's ruin and all.
See the relief cutting around it.
Yes, you can, and
and
you can certainly again see the chisel marks going through there. And there's actually there's a laser technology that they came up with some years ago now, which can measure the amount of pounding that is done to stone. It'll pick up the impact, the residual impact of the stone, where through the pounding it's been compacted. Because particularly sandstone, if you think about it geologically, it's grains of sand. And so you subject it, I think it's some sort of laser technology where they can almost do this sort of echo system as to where the stone has been chiselled away, and that has resulted in impacting of the grains of the sandstone underneath. So you can actually trace from that where the cut lines are, in theory.
As opposed to erosion.
Yeah, as opposed to what we normally see, which one of my colleagues, a Victorianist I have to say, helpfully describes as unbaked dough. And I think when you see things like that, you think, yeah, actually we got a point.
It's a bit like seeing Jesus in a piece of chalk, isn't it? You can.
That's precisely the risk.
Yes.
With worn or
Yeah.
damaged stones,
But I think it would be so interesting, the narratives you could construct about where that stood in relation to whatever was on this site. Because it's clearly a site that people are going to approach from different avenues. And because the sides are so different, the two main sides are so different, there's clearly an understanding that people coming from one approach will see one thing first, and then people coming from the other side will see something different. Which means that there's actually quite a lot of thinking going into its placement and its decoration.
Can I add something about the context of a river crossing?
Yeah, he did say scholars.
Yes. Jane has just referred to recent work in Nottinghamshire, which has really established that just about every early elaborate cross is sitting on a major crossing of the Trent, and that's what it comes down to. What they've missed, and as you know, they never miss anything because they're very clever, but they have missed something which is relevant to this discussion, and that is there does seem to me to be a correlation between at least one or two of these big crosses in Nottinghamshire and Oswald dedications. So that's a particularly interesting parallel for something sitting here with the 10th century context.
And what's really interesting is that the work I've been doing in Derbyshire at Wilne, which is actually, and I didn't realise this for the last time, I've been going to this tiny little church outside Derby right near the Nottinghamshire border. And Wilne is at a crossing of what I've discovered recently, very recently, like in the last 6 months, is Wilne is at the church at Wilne is on the site of a traditional crossing of a tributary of the Trent that got wiped out within living memory. And at Wilne, why I get excited about Wilne is that it's a column, not a cross-section cross, but a column that was tapered, and I'm thinking something not quite as high as the Wolverhampton column, but something quite big, and probably not unlike Masson, but perhaps going up a little bit higher, which Masson of course has lost its top. But it was carved in registers like the Masson column, animal ornament set in arcading in registers, and Wilne, I don't know how far the dedication goes back, but it's dedicated to Chad. So yeah, there are all these, it's kind of a leitmotif the more we start thinking about these things in the landscape, which when you're looking, I mean, let's face it, this is a very small piece of stone. We're creating big stories. But I think that's where the excitement of doing research into these things lies.
Would the cross have been a separate piece of stone on top of the pillar?
That did vary, but very often they were monoliths. They weren't composite monuments. So the cross at Bewcastle, which is, sorry, I work in old money, it's 16 feet high without the crosshead, which would have probably added another 2.5 feet on top of that. That is a single block of stone all the way up, but there is a tenon hole in the top. And the beauty of these crosses is that they knew to put the tenon hole just slightly off centre, so you couldn't put your crosshead on the wrong way round. Yeah, they knew what they were about there. But it just, I think it depends on what the quarry is going to allow you, the size of the stone it's going to enable you to cut out of the beds, as to whether you have composite monuments or whether you have monolithic ones. And you look at the stones at Middleton, which stand about this high, and they're all a single piece of stone. I think where you get a bit higher, you end up doing the shaft, and then you put the crosshead on the top.
There's so much to cover with, isn't it? You've got this sticking out, you've got all these sections down the side.
I think that's part of it. It's a huge practical problem for a big monument to do, isn't it?
They, I suspect, would be using very basic physics of lever, fulcrum, pulleys, and actually, again, hanging out with the wrong sorts of people, mathematicians, physicists. I probably just slated half the people in the audience. I am now convinced through talking to them that when you take something like a pillar of stone, once you've got it upright and down in the hole, you don't need an enormously deep hole. It's actually the weight and gravity of the stone monument that actually holds it in place. Now obviously if you've got ground slippage, well this we don't know, but they clearly had the ways and the means, and I think they did use river systems, because it's much easier to float stone up a river than it is to hike it over an old broken Roman road that's all muddy and so they must have had the means to do it.
Did any of them have plinths?
They all have base stones. They didn't go straight into the earth. They had base stones that sometimes are actually about twice the size of that box. and about as deep as that box, with the socle hole in the middle, and they're not very deep. So there's like the base of the shaft acts as a tenon, a mortise to go in. That distributes the weight, and for most of the Anglo-Saxon ones, it's the base stone that gets buried in the ground, with perhaps a little bit showing up above, which to my mind is really exciting when you get the whole side of a cross shaft being carved in a plant scroll. The tree literally grows out of the ground. It's very clever. In Ireland, there's one or two in England. There's one at Lindisfarne. There's one at Bishop Auckland. Those are the ones at the top of my head. There's one in Yorkshire, Rastrick.
Decorated.
Yes.
In Hurworth and the Tees Valley. I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where they have quite substantial base stones that are carved, and the cross was put in the top. Those are standard across Ireland. They are very rare in Anglo-Saxon England. I just think they were trying to do other things, because you get very few plant scrolls on the Irish crosses.
And where you get them, they look like quotations from something
Yes.
foreign.
Yeah.
They don't look like a native tradition.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.